This is to illustrate the placement of the cedarium or the face cloth as we've determined. This is a model of the cedarium of Oviedo here. We show this to indicate that the cedarium was tucked behind the head and folded across the face and doubled back on itself. From evidence on the cedarium, we feel that the cedarium was put on while the body was still on the cross, and that the crown of thorns was on at the time. This view is to show how we feel the body would have been on the cross with the crown of thorns being pushed up so that the cedarium could be tucked behind it. We will focus in to show more closely. Above the head here is the title, as we feel is closely represented, written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. They were all written from right to left, so they appear backwards here. This is to show the crown of thorns on the head with the cedarium covering the face here. We feel that this was carried this way to the place of the tomb, was probably put down outside while the tomb was prepared and the shroud prepared. At that point, we feel that both the cedarium and the crown of thorns were removed, and having the black blood on them, they were put in the tomb with the body. This is to illustrate the first layer of objects that were placed within the shroud next to the body. Since there were several layers of these, we will show these in degrees here. First, the body was stretched out here with the chin band on, and as we see here, and with the coins over the eyes as we see placed here. As we have found the head phylactery on, which is actually in the wrong place, and was desecrated by having the front of it torn open. We can see how the chin band was put around through the beard in this way. We have found also an amulet around the neck, such as illustrated here. We feel that this is an amulet showing Tiberius Caesar and the goddess Roma on it, obviously put on as act of ridicule and desecration. It had two tassels attached to it, which undoubtedly were taken from the fringe of a Jewish garment, hence probably mocking the man of the shroud as the high priest, as the high priest wore a amulet or a breastpiece, plate, indicating the 12 tribes of Israel. This shows how the hands had been folded, and the area here indicates a modesty cloth that was put on over the lower abdomen and upper thighs. The spear was placed by the left side, as we see here, extending down. And the sponge on a reed or a rod was put down by the right arm, as we see down here. Close to the feet, as we see here, we feel that we have found indication that of the tunic and the cloak, which we feel were folded and put inside the shroud. This shows the two garments which are full size, as close replications of early Jewish tunics and cloaks folded up here. We can identify the rope belt on one garment, probably the tunic here. In addition, the three spikes have been identified within the shroud also. This here are spikes indicating the relative position of these. To zoom in somewhat more closely on the amulet, and then on the left arm, as we see here, we feel is the other one of the phylacteries, or tefillin. This also was desecrated by being put on in the in an upside-down position, as well as the top of it was torn also. One of the spikes is in very close approximation to the shaft of the spear. There are two small nails about 2 inches long by it as well. This shows how the rope would have been in place, the spike down by the feet, and then the third spike is on the other side. This is the same depth taken from the viewpoint of the top of the body looking down, seeing how the spear and the sponge were placed along the side. To focus in on the head more closely here, we see how the phylactery was placed on the head here, and the chin band tied around here. Focusing in even more closely, we can see how the coins were put over the eyes here. We had identified these as both Pontius Pilate lepta, both struck in 29 AD. Again, the amulet around the neck, the phylactery of the left arm. Actually, the strap of the phylactery was loosened. Ordinarily, it was wrapped around the left forearm 7 times, and then around the left hand and the fingers. It had come loose, and the end of it was the strap was tucked down the left side and behind the left thigh, and the end was brought back and tucked under the arm. Here again we see how the two small nails were placed by the side of the large spike. The nails approximately 2 inches long. The spikes are approximately 6.5 to 7 inches long, square, and about a ½ inch in the dimensions. This is to illustrate the next layering of objects to be found within the shroud itself. Here we will show some of these, as we have found a pair of sandals on the shroud here along the side. Right and left pair of sandals, as that they are approximately 10.5 inches long. One is placed up close to the elbow here, and the other is placed down close to the knee. In addition, we found a small trowel-like object, or sort of like a large spoon, and a small dish. Within this, there was apparently a clump of dirt. This was tied in with a small, apparently piece of cloth, and we feel that this was used to scoop up blood that had fallen on the ground. We also found, that's illustrated here, 2 small brooms. We found that they are by the left lower leg here, illustrated here. In addition, there's a coil of rope by the feet, so we see here, and also there's a large hammer here. There's a heavy hammer that is by the right lower leg here. So this shows that there were a large number of objects, some of which were piled on top of each other within the shroud. The next layer shows that 2 additional major objects. One is the crown of thorns, which we see here by the right side of the head, somewhat up over the right shoulder here. The thorn is called a gundelia thorn, which is found in the Middle East. This is a representation to indicate the general size and configuration of it and indicate the placement on the shroud. It was taken off the head, and of course, having the lifeblood, by Jewish tradition, it would have been put in the tomb of the body. And here we find evidence on the shroud itself, as we see right here by the corresponding area on the right shoulder, the evidence of the thorns and the crown of thorns that was made up from this particular Gandelia thorn. The next additional object is the title or titulus, which was also included here. Find that this was a rather sizable sign which had been nailed up over the head. It may well have been worn on the way out to the place of crucifixion as well. And that here, this is a reconstruction from the portion of the title found in the Church of the Holy Cross in Rome, which reputedly was secured from Jerusalem by Helena, the mother of Constantine. So this shows how the title is down by the left lower leg here. The next objects that we've put on here are layered are some objects that are put on top of the title. As we see here, we find a pair of tongs, which undoubtedly used to pull the nails out here, as well as the two flagra or scourges, as we see here. See the handles paralleling the title here, and the two of them with three thongs with little objects, probably knuckle bones of sheep along them here. In all likelihood, these were not the same flagra that were used for the primary scourging, which apparently was the flagrum taxulatum, or a type of scourge which had small barbs on it. These were probably the ones that the executioners carried along on the way to the crucifixion. And the prisoners ordinarily were scourged on the way out to crucifixion rather than prior to it. We can tell by other findings that the man of the shroud was scourged severely as an exemplary type of scourging, and then the tunic was put on, so that these were ones that were probably used primarily on the thieves which accompanied Christ to the place of crucifixion. He may have been hit several times with them, times that he fell, although we're not sure, since the marks on the body are almost entirely those of the flagrum taxulatum. On the chest, we see the object here also. This is, we feel, is the image of a small oil lamp. During ancient times, Jewish people often had an oil lamp that was put in the tomb with the body as well. This shows the area on the chest close to the amulet where we feel the oil lamp very likely was placed. This shows another rather astounding finding, that's that there are literally hundreds of flower images within the shroud as well. This gives a general indication of how some of the flowers were distributed here. There's some scattered up and down the sides of the body, although most are clustered around the abdomen, the chest, and particularly around the head and the face, such as we see here. Zooming in more closely, just to get an idea how these are distributed, we find them particularly clustered around the face. There are even a few that are on the chin band or in the beard as well. There are several small bouquets scattered particularly over the abdomen, the hands, and down the side of the body here as well. We have been able to identify large numbers of these flowers. We feel that we have identified with a good high degree of accuracy 26 species of these flowers, all of them being Israeli flowers, or flowers that are found Israel, although some are found in the wider distribution, but all blooming in March and April. This is a view from the top of the head, again to indicate how the flowers are distributed here. They were packed in on each side of the head here, and down over the chest, the abdomen, and some scattered down the sides as well. There are a few scattered flowers to be found all the way down even by the feet. This to look more closely at how the appearance was in review. As we see here the flowers by the head, the spear at this point, and down the body at this side we see the title with the lettering on it, and the two flagra or scourges which were here, as well as the pair of tongs which were laid down on top of the lower part of the title here. You see a coil of rope by the feet, as well as another one of the nails, or the spikes that were used for the crucifixion. By the right lower leg, we see the hammer, as well as a small scoop or trowel, and a small container containing some dirt. In addition, we find a pair of sandals up by the right side of the body here, and then up by the head we find the crown of thorns, as well as the sponge at this point. One would wonder why all of these objects would be found here. Our speculation is that the body was carried from the place of crucifixion, probably on the cross, to the tomb. That we speculate the nails were taken out at that time, and the body was placed in the tomb. We speculate that the cross would probably have been carried down there. This speculation, but we would infer that the centurion had been given authorization to yield the body up, probably carried the body on the cross, as well as the various implements and the Roman weapon, which would have had the lifeblood on it, and gave it to the friends to be placed in the tomb, as it too would have had the lifeblood on it, and hence customarily buried with the body. Here we see the shroud folded over, such as we saw in early artistic depictions, how the body was laid on the cloth, the objects were put in, and then the top part of the cloth was simply folded down over the top like this and draped. This shows how the body would have appeared in general in the tomb. Our model here is 6 feet, very slightly taller than the man of the shroud, and that weighs about 165 pounds, approximately the same weight. This shows how the various objects would have been in the shroud, and by the image forming process, the images of not only the body, but the flowers and some 22 other objects that were put within the shroud are to be found on the shroud itself, although often in incomplete detail. This to examine more closely in review the title, the tongs, the flagra, the spear, the flowers, the amulet, the lamp on the chest, the chin band, the phylactery of the arm, the phylactery of the forehead, the coins over the eyes, multiple flowers, the crown of thorns, the sponge at this point, the sandals, the spikes, and the hammer, and the scoop with the dish and the dirt in it. And thus, as we can see, as the images are paralleled here, this is the photograph, the N-ray photograph of the shroud life size, which is parallel with the body. The image would appear as though the photograph here were simply folded out toward here and laid down on top. And we find that these images correspond very nicely to the objects that we see on the shroud. At this point, I'd like to indicate speculation on what would have been found by the biblical account. The story indicates that that the women and John Peter come in the tomb and entering in found the grave clothes without the body and the face cloth folded by itself. We would like to show here what we feel and all probability they found. This would indicate the body being gone out of the linen with it still living in place with the objects collapsed in their place. The cloth, the face cloth or sudarium, which was folded by itself, that we feel is the sudarium of Oviedo, or the face cloth that is in existence, which would have been taken off of the body and put in place, folded, and laid in the tomb, apparently close by where the body lay. We're speculating, but because it was saturated with fresh, wet blood, it may not have been put within the shroud itself, as the other objects were, but was laid to one side. The image-forming process is still a mystery, but the work that Scheuermann has undertaken and Benson confirmed indicates that it has the properties of a coronal discharge. This would indicate that all objects within this high-energy field would produce a secondary type of radiation, which does produce images on cloth. That by Benson's calculations, this would require a tremendous amount of energy to produce an image such as we see on the linen. He calculated by some experimentation, which certainly is limited because of the peculiar nature of it, that it would probably have taken approximately 11,000 kilowatts, or this is 15,000 horsepower of energy released in a tenth of a second or less at probably 1 to 200 million volts to produce this type of image. We feel that the image we see here, the frontal image of the shroud, would be the image that was on the inside of the top part of the shroud, as we see here. This, to our way of thinking, would be the reason that John became a believer without ever having seen the resurrected Christ, because they feel that this image was formed immediately and was then apparent to the people. The image would have been much darker originally, as artistic productions early on indicated that many of the images of the objects that we have found recently were much more apparent at an earlier time. Because of a gradual yellowing of the cloth, the images have become less apparent over the time, so that they are can be seen only by various enhancement techniques now. This is with the top part of the shroud folded back to give an idea of what we feel the appearance it would have been with the body being gone. As that other studies have shown that it would have been impossible to take the body out of the cloth by unwrapping in some way without disturbing the blood clots. For that reason, we feel that the other objects that were in it would have been undisturbed, except for collapsing on themselves, such as we would see here. This shows, again, the top of the shroud being folded back. We now showing the back side of the shroud here. As we find that the objects that would be against the back side of the shroud would leave their image there. In a number of cases, the one image tends to penetrate another, so that this makes things rather confusing. There's wide variation in this. The fact that there's several layers means that some images are found on one side and not on the other, although with a number of objects, as a part of the spear and the sponge, we find images both on the front and the back parts of the shroud itself. For instance, here, one of the nails at this point is underlying the title. There are two small nails here. This particular nail is not visible on the front part of the image, but we would show here on the back part of the image where the image of this spike is. As we will focus in on this here. Thus it is in the center of the field now, in the center, extending almost entirely from the right to the left side in midfield. The two small nails can be seen slightly to the left of center, and the point of the spike can be seen near the right margin. So this would show that the various images are have left themselves in various parts here. As some of them, for instance, being on top of the garments at this point would not show on the back side, whereas they would be apparent on the front side. Thus, we feel that we find evidence on the shroud to indicate that the various traditional relics which have been described were put in the tomb with the body, and almost all of them were enclosed within the shroud, so that we have the incredible finding of the faint images of these various objects and relics, as well as the flowers themselves, are on the shroud. The images of the flowers would indicate that they would be between 1 and 2 days after picking, which would be consistent with the finding of the blood stains and the lack of decomposition of the body, to indicate that whatever process took place here took place abruptly, somewhere between 1 and 2 days after death had occurred.